All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. I am joined today by our Superintendent of Police, Superintendent Larry Snelling, OEMC Executive Director, Jose Torrado, our Chicago Fire Department Commissioner, Annette Nance Holt, our Department of Transportation Commissioner Tom Carney, thank you for being here, and Secret Service for DNC Coordinator Jeff Burnside. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for your leadership and commitment to hosting what I am confident will be a successful Democratic National Convention. We are here today to share more about our coordination and planning, as well as community outreach efforts as we prepare to welcome the DNC to the city of Chicago. Together, we are ready to host a safe and secure convention and welcome tens of thousands of visitors to the greatest city in the world. Chicago is no stranger to hosting large historic events. In fact, we are certainly no stranger to hosting the Democratic National Convention. In fact, our city leads the nation, hosting 25 Republican and Democratic National Conventions between 1860 and 1996. On behalf of our city, I am immensely proud and thrilled to welcome this event back to our city, and I'm confident about its success. The mayor's office, as well as the city departments and agencies, have been planning and coordinating this event since Chicago was announced as the host city last year. The city has also been doing extensive community outreach to ensure that residents are aware of the activity that will be taking place in the convention area, as well as the surrounding areas. Superintendent Snelling and our Executive Director Torrado will share more about our public safety efforts as well as our strategies momentarily. We will continue our community outreach and engagement efforts up unto and throughout the convention. Everyone will be informed of traffic reroutes, road closures, emergency notifications, and more. And we will ensure that businesses and residents know what to expect. Our number one priority is the safety of all of our residents and all of our visitors. The decision to host the DNC in Chicago is a recognition of our city's world-class infrastructure, unparalleled hospitality, and of course, the tremendous passion that our city residents always display. The spirit of our city, as well as its democratic values. In addition to our extensive coordination and preparation, we will ensure that this event is a success. I want to again express my gratitude to the DNC for selecting our city as the host city. I look forward to our continued partnership to make this city's best convention yet in the history of this country. So thank you all again, and with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Chicago Police Department Superintendent Larry Snelling.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And again, man, anybody here but me and you, I guess. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Not only would I like to thank Mayor Johnson, but all of our partners here that are standing here working toward public safety. Since it was announced last spring that the DNC was going to be hosted in Chicago, we immediately started preparing. CPD is no stranger to securing major events that draw attendees from all over the country and the world. This is no different. Many of our command staff members who are leading the DNC planning were also directly involved in the training and the preparation for the 2012 NATO summit, myself included. The experience and knowledge we gained from NATO and the many major events we've secured have been invaluable, and we're using what we've learned to apply to the DNC that's upcoming. We will be ready for the large number of visitors and activity near the United Center and McCormick Place. We have been working closely with all of our partners at the Secret Service, which will be responsible for securing the inside of the convention at the United Center and McCormick Place. This will allow CPD to focus on everything going on outside of the convention, including large-scale First Amendment activity. Our officers are receiving training in anticipation of large demonstrations. This training is rooted in constitutional policing, with public safety as our priority. We will protect all those exercising their First Amendment rights, as well as those who are working, living, visiting in the areas affected by the convention. What we will not tolerate is criminal activity, violence, vandalism will not be tolerated. We will enforce the law to keep the city safe. I also want to reassure our residents that while we are at this large-scale event, that your neighborhoods will be safe. A large number of police officers working around the convention sites will be there, but we will also have a plan to ensure that our officers continue to patrol our neighborhoods and answer calls for service. We will maintain sufficient staffing within our police districts, and most importantly, we will continue responding to emergency calls as quickly as possible. I just want to end with this. It is important to understand that in the city of Chicago, our police department has been faced with these types of challenges before, and we've come out on top. The Chicago Police Department does a great job of learning from the past. And everything that we've learned from the NATO event and all the way back to the WTO in 03 and 02, we've applied to what's upcoming. Our officers will be prepared to deal with any and everything that's coming. We want to make sure that everyone's safe. We want to make sure that anyone traveling here is safe, and our officers will be out there to make sure that that happens. With that being said, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Communications, Jose Tirado.
Thank you, Superintendent Snelling. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Oh, my goodness, y'all.
My name's
Third take. Could you try that one more time?
Good afternoon. My name's Jose Tirado. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Communications. OMC will be coordinating public safety efforts around the United Center, McCormick Place, and throughout the rest of the city during the Democratic National Convention in August. Our #1 priority is public safety. Since last year, OMC has been coordinating security and safety planning with the Secret Service, Chicago Police Department, Chicago Fire Department, city agencies, partners, and convention organizers to ensure the safety of the Chicago residents, visitors, convention attendees as well. We will have plans in place to handle additional crowds and increased traffic citywide. We're also planning for impacts to critical facilities, businesses, and neighborhoods, as well as alternate routes for motorists and first responders. OMC, along with the Mayor's Office of Community Engagement and other City of Chicago departments, will be canvassing impacted areas to engage with residents and businesses on what to expect. This includes the areas around the United Center, McCormick Place, the Central Business District, West Loop, and also the South Loop. OMC is creating a landing page at chicago.gov/OMC that will host the information related to public safety, street closures, traffic reroutes, emergency notifications, and much more. Throughout the convention, OMC will be pushing out important notifications in the event of critical incidents. We have developed dedicated text alert for the convention under DNC 2024 that will be available in coming weeks. The best way to receive all alerts, updates, weather, and maps on how to get around the city of Chicago is to download the Chicago OMC app. OMC will serve as a central hub for all information related to safety within the city. To enhance our monitoring of citywide events, OMC will activate our Emergency Operations Center for that week, staffed by local, state, and federal law enforcement, along with public safety personnel and representatives from additional city agencies that support this mission. Finally, While we make every effort on behalf of the city to keep residents and visitors safe, we want to make everyone in the city also responsible. I want to remind the public, if you see something, please say something. Always be aware of your surroundings and report suspicious packages and any activity that needs to be called into the 911 center. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Secret Service 2024 DNC Coordinator, Jeff Burnside.
Good afternoon.
Hey, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, Superintendent Snelling, Executive Director Torado, for your partnership in preparing for the upcoming Democratic National Convention. It's no doubt an exhilarating time for Chicago and the region. This summer, the city will be on the world stage hosting a national special security event. It's also unprecedented to have the Republican National Convention, another NSSE, just a month earlier and such a short drive away. Since May, the United States Secret Service has been working with our city, state, county, and federal partners to devise a DNC security plan that ensures a safe environment and minimizes disruptions. While those plans are not yet final, the work is well underway, and we will continue to fine-tune them in the coming months. We know that Chicago is the city that works, and the Secret Service will work alongside our partners throughout the convention. To offer a bit of background, national political conventions such as the DNC are reoccurring National Special Security Events, or NSSEs. This designation by the Department of Homeland Security allows the federal government to tap its full array of resources to develop event security and incident management plans. The Secret Service has a long proven track record of securing large-scale events and is the lead agency in developing and implementing NSSE security plans. Again, our goal is to provide a safe and secure environment for the general public, event participants, Secret Service protectees, and other dignitaries during the event, and to curtail disruptions by working with all of the stakeholders. Since 1998, the Secret Service has done just that, by overseeing operational security at all NSSEs, such as the United Nations General Assembly and the State of the Union Address. A recent example is the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, or APEC, which was held this past November in San Francisco. Many world leaders gathered at the Moscone Center for the forum. I'll refer you to the map of the convention center and the protective zones around the NSSE. The green area is the outer perimeter. Pedestrians were able to move freely within this zone. However, all vehicles were subject to screening before entry. The red area is the inner perimeter. Only residents, those attending the event, shoppers headed to businesses, and others with official business were permitted within this zone. You will see a similar setup around the United Center and McCormick Place during the DNC. The specific maps, which will include some street closures, are still under development. The Secret Service and our partners in the Chicago Police Department, the Office of Emergency Management and Communications, and the Mayor's Office will canvass these areas in the upcoming weeks to hear directly from residents and businesses. We want to know their concerns now. The goal is to answer any questions and to do our best to design a plan that works for everyone and creates the safest possible atmosphere. The Secret Service is responsible for security within the footprint of every NSSE, but it's important to note that our agency does not impose security plans on local jurisdictions. We work in partnership with local agencies and private industry. Both have a significant amount of say in how the security plan comes together. This behind-the-scene work looks at a wide array of potential threats, including developing security plans for items such as airspace security, civil disturbance and crowd management, hazmat response, and more. None of this is new to Chicago. The city has a proven track record of managing large-scale events, whether it's the downtown NASCAR race last summer, the annual Lollapalooza Concert Festival, the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, or Taste of Chicago. Again, we want to thank all of our partners, and we look forward to continuing our work with our public safety counterparts, the business community, and the citizens of this great city. The DNC will be a world-class event that showcases everything that's wonderful about Chicago. We are delighted to be here and to be part of the process. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for bearing through those presentations. This is the time for questions.
We'll start. Back row. One question, please, on the topic of UNC. Go ahead, Dan.
What is the status of the money that the city has requested from the federal government for additional security? I believe it's $75 million that both Chicago and Milwaukee are trying to get for the two conventions.
Yeah, so that ask went forth several months ago. It is now in the hands of the legislative apparatus. I believe that there's a likely vote before the week ends, so by Friday. Right now, everything is indicating that we are well-positioned, both the city of Chicago and Milwaukee, to have those resources so that we can, keep the convention secure, safe. Thank you.
Hey, Mayor. Several protest groups feel they've been unfairly denied permits already, and they plan to have large demonstrations with or without permits. I've talked to a couple. What spirit are you using to address permitting for large protests? And are large protests something you're worried about, something you think could cast a shadow over the DNC?
So we firmly believe in the fundamental right to assemble as well as to protest. I'm not here without that movement. So the spirit in which I bring to the conversation is, I've been someone who's been a part of large-scale protests. In fact, Black liberation is tied to large-scale protests. We just want to make sure that it is done in a safe and secure area so that that right to assemble doesn't get taken over by individuals who may have other interests. So our Department of Transportation, Tom Carney, is quite capable. Obviously, the superintendent, Snelling, he's been through a number of major events before, so I'm confident that the right to assemble and protest will be able to be carried out. And no, I don't believe that it casts a shadow over the convention. In fact, I fully expect our democracy to continue to protest because there are a lot of things that we still have to transform and change. So I'm grateful to those organizers.
Hi, Mayor. Elizabeth Matthews, Fox 32. Anytime a large event happens, I think a lot of residents think, oh, maybe they'll bring in the National Guard. Obviously, you have the support of the federal government and all different law enforcement agencies. Is this something that you would think about bringing the National Guard in or perhaps be on call if needed?
We haven't, made a determination of what else is needed. I mean, we have the Secret Service, you have the local police department. I don't want, people to be, to live in fear that we cannot have a convention with a reasonable amount of protests and dissidents that takes place without people being harmed. As we've said, the Superintendent Stelling made it absolutely clear, we're not going to tolerate vandalism and any type of activity that would bring harm to the people of Chicago. We're not going to tolerate it, and we'll hold those individuals accountable.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
I want to actually follow up on that a little bit because I don't know if you've heard yet, but in New York, the governor there, because of problems on the transit system, has sent or is deploying the National Guard and state police to help secure transit. Is that something that could be considered during this time when the world is watching and, frankly, half the world is coming here to assist? Is that something that would be thought of?
Well, coordination with state and county, that is happening in the federal government. So all those levels of coordination are already in place. Look, the National Guard, that's under the jurisdiction of the governor of Illinois, right? So all I can say is what I am responsible for and how we are coordinating with every single level of government to make sure that this convention is safe, that we have put forth all mechanisms that have been used in the past, along with, again, some additional resources that we are counting on, including technology that can actually help keep, people safe. So that work is happening. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Your administration previously warned that it could see, 10 buses of asylum seekers being sent a day as the DNC nears. With arrivals of migrants dropping in recent weeks, are you all still planning for a potential sudden increase? And how are you all prepping for that with the city also, closing some shelters recently?
Yeah, so the ongoing international crisis around those who are seeking asylum is something that, as I've said repeatedly, it's an international crisis that local municipalities are being asked to stand up. So we're going to continue our coordinated effort with the federal, state, county government, and other local municipalities, as I've done, to provide an operation that's centered around people's humanity. Now, we don't have control over what the governor of Texas is doing. It's unfortunate. We know why he's doing it. He is working to bring shame and embarrassment to the people of America, and to score some level of political points with people who are experiencing a great deal of frustration and trepidation around the fact that Congress has refused to act to actually implement, real immigration reform policy. So we're going to continue to coordinate and work with all sources that are available to us, our mutual aid supporters, again, every single level of government, to make sure that we are best positioned to deal with what is likely to be an influx coming into the city of Chicago. An influx of migrants, to be specific.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mayor. In terms of when specific safety maps will be complete, I believe Mr. Tirado mentioned that they are still in progress.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
when that
Tirado,
completion
please.
will be revealed?
I'm sorry, can you ask me that again?
Yes, you mentioned that the specific, I'm sorry, I believe it was you mentioned that specific safety maps were still in progress in terms of, I'm sorry, it may have been the Secret Service gentleman, I apologize. But just wondering when those maps would be complete in terms of safety maps like around McCormick Place as well as the United Center.
So in reference to those safety maps, we can't give you an exact date because this is a fluid situation. So within a few weeks, we should have those maps finalized, hopefully. And those are scheduled to change as well.
All right, thank you.
You got it, Mayor.
Mayor, can you just address the whole issue with ShotSpotter? You kept ShotSpotter through the fall, through DNC. How do you see that playing a role in helping keep things safe for convention goers and everyone else coming here for the DNC?
Well, we did cancel the contract. There is an extension as we decompress and demobilize, sorry, not decompress, but demobilize this apparatus. Look, the full-out public safety plan for the DNC is inclusive. I'm not sure how this particular form of technology, I think I get your question. It's a shot detection technology. So if a shot is fired or any other loud sound that is picked up by this form of technology, it will provide the same notification that it has been.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
The last wide-scale protests in Chicago were, of course, the protests that were triggered by the police murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. The Inspector General found the Chicago Police Department botched every aspect of their response to those protests, and the independent monitoring team in charge of enforcing the consent decree said that the Chicago Police Department was unprepared to police constitutionally and made a series of recommendations on how the CPD should address large-scale First Amendment protests. Will you commit to ensuring that those recommendations are in place by the time of the convention? And what else does CPD need to do to ensure that they respect the First Amendment rights of protesters coming to Chicago?
So one of the first things that Superintendent Snelling articulated is that the Chicago Police Department continues to learn from past practices. It's an ongoing training and development that continues to take place. As far as my own personal commitment, I've made it very clear that constitutional policing is the goal. The superintendent and I, we agree in constitutional policing. That's why we're in charge. As far as, other elements around some of the specific training that is going to take place, Superintendent Snelling can speak to that because it's actually quite extensive. Superintendent?
Yes, to address your question and the Inspector General's report, when we look at the George Floyd incident, this was a bunch of protesters who converged upon the city. There was civil unrest across the entire city. It was violent. There were vehicles burned. Officers were attacked. People were murdered in the middle of this. I don't believe the report accounted for that. What I will tell you is, for that type of pop-up protest that occurred during that time, people just converging on the city, the training, our officers had not been properly prepared for that, and I will be the first to say that. Our officers were out there without the training to deal with that type of situation. The training that we provided for our officers during the 2012 NATO event, it proved that our officers could provide a service in a large-scale protest that was completely constitutional. We had a major reduction in complaints against officers during that time compared to the World Trade Organization event, where we were sued for upwards of $6 million prior to that. We used all of the things that went wrong during that time, along with looking at other cities where they may have made mistakes. And we learned from those things, and we trained around that. So what we're doing right now is we have gone right back to the drawing board, just like we did for the 2012 NATO event. Our officers are being trained in First Amendment rights. We're training our officers for these large-scale protests, understanding the First Amendment, constitutional policing. Every single thing that we're doing right now is rooted in constitutional policing. But we're also training our officers how to respond when they see these levels of violence, when they see vandalism, when they see physical attacks on others. Our officers will be able to respond, and I can tell you this right now. We've seen major protests across this city for the past several months, and I believe that our officers have responded in an incredible way. We haven't seen things get out of control or get out of hand. We're working with organizers to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what those organizers are looking for, what they want, their route, and we want to make sure and ensure their safety. But at the same time, we want to ensure the safety of the people who are living here in the city of Chicago. So we want to make sure that we maintain peace, but we're going to police constitutionally, but we're also not going to tolerate the violence.
Superintendent Snelling, if you can stay there, can you just speak specifically, you talked about NATO, which was a large-scale planned event like the DNC is going to be. What did you learn from that, and what do you think didn't work during NATO as well? If you can kind of talk to maybe some improvements that your department can do.
Well, we did an after action. I can tell you more worked than didn't work, and we were actually surprised at how much everything worked. One of the things that I can tell you is just the high visibility, soft uniforms, our officers not being in a position where it looks like we're escalating a situation. I think our officers did a great job of de-escalating certain situations, bringing it down, and not being the initiators of physical control. We were proactive, but what we didn't want to do is overreact, and our officers did not do that. The high visibility, I think, helped. We had many officers on bikes. I cannot say enough about how those officers responded, and they were trained in field force operations. So all of our officers are trained in field force operations. So we're going to continue that. Now, some of the things that we looked at, where we had our officers deployed, how many officers were deployed in those situations, and what we could have done better. So we've looked at those things. We've added that to the training that we're doing now. Obviously, it's been 12 years since the 2012 NATO event, or close to it. So some things have changed. So we're also training around that. Now, a lot of this is also tied to our consent decree. So we are working with the monitors, we're working with the monitoring team on the tactics that we're going to be using to make sure that there's an approval before we get started out there when the DNC starts. So the training is ongoing. Our officers have a clear understanding, and I have no doubt that they are going to respond the way that they're supposed to. Okay.
Hi, Mayor Lee John Greco with Cranes. Actually, I have a question about Bring Chicago Home. Just came out that the judge sided with supporters of the measure, so just wanted to get your reaction to that.
That's your question, by the way.
What?
That's your question.
Oh, come on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I paused long. Look, I've said all along that the people of Chicago should determine how we address the unhoused crises in Chicago. And I made a commitment as not just a candidate, but as mayor of the city of Chicago, that I would do everything in my power to move us closer towards housing for all. You know, organizing in this city is a major part of what has helped transform our city over the course of decades, you know, and that history is still intact, you know. So, you know, I'm encouraging everyone to vote in this upcoming election cycle, and you know, I'm grateful that so many people have worked hard over the course of now the third administration, because this has been a long time coming for the people of Chicago, where two other administrations were reticent or just, quite frankly, negligent. It's a different day for Chicago. That's a good thing.
Sure, we all love news breaking in the middle of a press conference. Quick
I
question.
thought you were going to say that my child needs a ride from school, so okay.
Quick question about the NSSE zones, maybe for the Secret Service. Are there going to be two in Chicago, McCormick Place and United Center? And will there be a similar sort of red zone that you illustrated in your San Francisco example for those two sites?
So the answer to your question on both counts is yes. So those plans are still in development. We will have a perimeter around McCormick Place and United Center. There will be an outer perimeter and an inner perimeter that will work typically like the example that you saw. We're working to kind of fine tune those details, and we'll make sure that that information is made public well in advance, because there will be some impacts to businesses and residents in the area, and we're doing everything we can to minimize that.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
There's been a lot of focus, there's been some reporting lately around some of the homeless encampments on the West Loop. I'm curious, are you planning on, clearing or sweeping these ahead of the DNC? Has there been outreach, in the weeks leading up to it? What is your plan there?
So my approach towards dealing with the unhoused in this city is not contingent upon the Democratic National Convention. I do believe that this convention has enormous potential to leave a lasting impact on the city of Chicago and the people of Chicago. That's, what my focus has been on, and, the DNC did not bring about homelessness. Failed policies have brought about homelessness. So I'm going to continue to work hard to address this crisis. I've invested $250 million into the unhoused. We have a new position that we have created, the Chief Homelessness Officer, to make sure that dollars and resources are getting, to the neighborhoods. But this is a real problem for not just the city of Chicago, but the country. 1 in 4 black children in our Chicago public schools will experience homelessness. The number of veterans and those who are struggling with their mental health, single parents who are couch surfing, college students who cannot afford housing in Chicago. So I do appreciate your question, but I want it to be emphatically clear that my approach towards the homelessness crisis is a part of my core conviction and values, and that it is not related to whether or not a convention comes to the city of Chicago or not.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
My question is actually for the superintendent, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Superintendent Snelling, you've recently just mentioned that your officers will be going on additional training as it relates to First Amendment practices. Can you elaborate exactly on what that means and what that would look like?
So when we talk about large-scale protests, any tactics that we use, and we're training them in what's called field force operations, and it's training to deal with large-scale protests. That has to be rooted in First Amendment practices. The reason is that when our officers are approaching, we have to have a clear understanding of what that First Amendment is so that we don't infringe upon those rights. We don't want our officers overreacting. So we want to make sure that we give them the tools to act properly. I'll give you a prime example. We've seen protests just this past weekend with groups who have been protesting peacefully. They're very large groups, but again, our officers are out there with a clear understanding that everyone has the right to have their voices heard and not to interfere with that. Obviously, there are directions that we want to give people so that they don't take over the streets, so that they don't block streets so people can't get to their day-to-day operations, stopping vehicles from getting to the hospital, emergency vehicles, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we have control over the event, but we also want to make sure that people get to exercise their First Amendment rights. So every single thing that we're doing right now with the training with our officers, be it classroom, be it physical, is rooted in First Amendment and constitutional training. Okay.
This is kind of an OEMC question. This Emergency Operations Center, is this going to be a kind of a new physical separate place? You mentioned other people from other states coming. Can you talk a little bit about what it is, who will be working there, what they'll be doing?
So no, it will be at OMC. We are happy to say that all our partners have been in several meetings and will conduct meetings throughout until actually through the actual event. So no, we're not putting a standalone space for OMC. We'll still be operating not only for the DNC, but also for the rest of the city as well.
But you mentioned people from other states are going to help staff, or there's going to be call in people from...
No, I'm just talking about our local city of Chicago, Cook County, our federal partners. If they're from other states, then just happen to be from other states assigned here.
Before we take, is this our final question?
Yes, sir.
Before we take our last question, I do want to acknowledge, I should have done this at the very top of the hour, the 27th Ward Alderperson, who's also the Vice Mayor, Walter Burnett, is here. Thank you for your leadership. Please.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
Can you tell me who is in charge of security? Who's the person in charge? And what happens if you have hundreds of protesters who take over a non-designated street? Will they be arrested? And if they are, where will they be put?
Okay. So we're going to start with the Superintendent of Police of the City of Chicago. So Superintendent Larry Snelling is in charge of our Chicago Police Department.
So when we have questions as reporters, we'll be calling.
I mean, I think the normal process that you usually engage in, all of that protocol will remain intact. Now, obviously, Superintendent Snelling, who has been here before, has relationships with every single level of government, so there'll be coordination. But I'm very, very confident in Superintendent Snelling's leadership.
So it's not Secret Service?
It would depend.
Well, I think what I want to make sure, if we're talking about who is specifically responsible for the jurisdiction in which this is taking place, and this is the City of Chicago, our superintendent is in charge of that. Now, obviously, there are certain matters that we hope don't arise, but in terms of leadership, it's Superintendent Snelling.
And Secret Service is shaking his head yes, so that's good.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Can the mayor respond to the mansion tax being back on?
I think we was fine. Yeah, and I'm not familiar with a mansions tax, by the way. Okay. I'm not familiar with that. Appreciate it.